Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing, does my ex think about me? I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my website for more details, www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing, does my ex think about me? So if you have been through a breakup, it's very natural to wonder if your ex thinks about you. In today's podcast, I discuss 3 points to consider when we ask the question, does my ex think about me? Type in the YouTube comments and let me know how long ago your breakup was. Okay, so let's get straight into this. And point number 1 is different perspectives. So if you've gone through a breakup, you are either the dumper or the dumpee. And depending on the position that you're at, will dictate the likelihood of if, when, and for how long you will be thinking about your ex. If you are the dumpee, the person who was dumped, the person whose relationship was ended, you are very likely to be thinking about your ex almost 24/7 soon after the breakup took place. This could even move into the medium term and occasionally into the long term. And this is because the relationship was ended and you didn't want it to happen. If you're the dumpee, you didn't want this to take place. You didn't want the breakup to happen. And you probably fought for the relationship to maintain and to continue. But unfortunately for you right now, the relationship is over and you'll be thinking of your ex very, very often. This is because when somebody ends a relationship, they become the person who has the power. The person who enters a relationship, the dumper, has the power. They've made a decision which can't be influenced, it seems. The dumpee, on the other hand, wants to make a decision to maintain and continue the relationship, and unfortunately, this thought, these actions are not happening. You know, the dumpee wants the relationship to continue, but what they believe, what they're fighting for, does not take place. The relationship does end. The finalized end of your relationship takes place. And as a dumpee, you spend your time thinking about your ex for a few reasons. Firstly, as I just said, you as the dumpee unfortunately don't have the power right now. And the power is with your ex who made the decisions. Their decisions are final. Your decisions don't seem to get any consideration. Therefore, it's very natural to be thinking of people that we put in a position of power, somebody who is on a pedestal. So if you are a dumpee, you're going to be thinking of your ex the dumper because they are somebody in your subconscious, at least, you're thinking as a more powerful person. Unfortunately, there is nothing more attractive than rejection. Okay, so if we have been dumped, we have in essence been rejected. Our subconscious will be thinking, I can't believe this, I don't know how this has happened, but what they want, they get. What I want, I don't get. They are powerful, and therefore that is why we see there is nothing more attractive than rejection, because we are attracted to the concept of why we was rejected. Okay, if you are rejected, then therefore you will see extra attraction in the person or instance that has rejected you. I would even go as far to say, as you now see your dumper 10 times probably as attractive as you did not long before the breakup actually happened. This is why a dumpee will be thinking of their ex 24/7, trying to figure out what they've done wrong, trying to figure out if they can get their ex back, trying to figure out what they can do to get back on track. Because when somebody is rejected, they feel very low value. This all links together, as I was saying. And unfortunately, this will affect the dumpee's self-esteem. If you don't feel that you are good enough, if you feel that somebody's decided that you aren't good enough for them, then you will be thinking, what can I do to become good enough? What have I done wrong? Why is my life not going how I wanted? And unfortunately, this spiraling set of negative emotions will dictate the fact that as a dumpee, you're thinking of your ex a lot. And soon after the breakup, you're thinking of them almost every single minute. But how do we compare this to the dumper? You know, I said in point number 1, different perspectives. So as the dumpee, you're thinking of your ex sooner after the breakup in comparison to the dumper. Now, of course, I do have to generalise. There are going to be instances where this isn't necessarily the case, especially if the dumper is feeling worried for their ex. They may be thinking of them in that way. But most dumpers will not be thinking of their dumpee half as much, if at all, after a breakup has taken place. A dumper will often have been umming and ahhing about a breakup for a long while before they action their decision. And when this takes place, they feel, oh my gosh, the worst is over. I now need to move forward with my life. They've probably been thinking about and worrying about how they're going to do this for a certain period of time and thinking of action in the breakup being something very destructive, very damaging and full of drama. So if and when they do this, they often think, well, the worst is over. I've got over that hill. I've got over that mountain of a problem. And now I want to focus on other things. I don't want to be surrounded by the drama. And they will try to take themselves off into what I call the single honeymoon period. The single honeymoon period is a period of time that single people experience after a breakup, and what I would say, generally speaking, from a dumper's perspective, a single honeymoon period could be anything between 6 months to a year after the breakup has taken place, where the dumper would be living their life that they felt they couldn't live when they was in the relationship. When they was in a relationship, they couldn't do certain things, but now they want to explore. But eventually, everything that seems new becomes old. Everything that seemed exciting becomes mundane. And as the dumper moves forward through this period of time, they will start to realise that the things they wanted to do that they couldn't do, they felt in the relationship, well, these things are no longer as exciting as they first felt. So when we look at 6 months to a year after the breakup has taken place, this is when a dumper is likely to self-reflect and to think about their past, including their dumpee. So when we answer the question, does my ex think about me? I would say here in point number one, it's different perspectives. Okay, a dumpee is going to be thinking of their ex almost 24/7 soon after the breakup takes place, but this will likely over time, medium to long term, start to lessen as they go through breakup recovery. But a dumper, the dumper is probably going in reverse. The dumper is probably not thinking of their ex as much at first, but as time moves forward, as they go through the single honeymoon period, as their life doesn't seem to be as exciting and fruitful as they may have expected, this is when they may start to think more and more about their past and their dumpee. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast about does my ex think about me? And point number 2 is triggers can last forever. So when we think about triggers, there are multiple different types. It could be a sound, it could be a song, it could be a TV show, it could be a movie, it could be a location, it could be food, it could be anything at all which conjures up thoughts of the past. So an example of a trigger may be during Christmas time, you hear a song which reminds you of when you last heard that song the previous Christmas, you were with your ex. That is a trigger. That's an example of a trigger. And like I said, there are so many possibilities. Maybe you go to a certain location and the last time you went there was with your ex, but perhaps that wasn't for many, many years. Maybe this was years ago that you went with your ex, but soon enough, as soon as you get to this place again, you're starting to think of your ex. And what we see here is that triggers can last forever. The longer your relationship was, the more triggers would have been developed, and therefore there is more chance of reconnecting with an ex if your relationship was longer. In my opinion, the longer a relationship, once you get into the years, for instance, this provides plentiful opportunities of triggers for an ex to think about their ex and start to wonder about them, start to grow intrigue, and start to grow romantic emotional attraction. So when we're thinking about, is my ex thinking about me, consider the length of your relationship. Okay, and the longer the relationship, the more triggers they are, and these triggers don't really dissolve. Okay, maybe a few of them might slowly but surely over time become less important in somebody's mind. Let's say, for instance, they went to a location with their ex, but then they go to that location 20, 30 times after the breakup. They're not necessarily going to be thinking of their ex every single time they go there from that point on, but the memories are still there, and maybe something takes place at that location which brings them right back to the time. Songs, movies, smells, food, all of these are examples of what can bring on as triggers and make you think of your ex and make your ex think of you. And these, as I've said, can last forever. There isn't a time limit. It's not like it's been so long since the trigger was implemented, you might say, to where it has no value. A trigger is connected to your mindset, deep inside your subconscious, deep inside your memory, and these can really pull on you years and years, decades and decades later. If you think back to your past, not even considering your ex, just think back to your past about memories you have when you were a child. If you can think of them, then imagine the situation of where years into the future you have a memory come into your mind from the past which is now more recently. Okay, and that is how this all takes place. Triggers can last forever. You will always think of your ex if certain things happen, and your ex will always think of you. Maybe over time, certain triggers might soften a little, like I've just said, but ultimately they last for a very long time, if not forever, and therefore there's always the chance of you thinking of your ex, and more importantly, if you're listening to this podcast, your ex thinking of you. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. And point number 3 is we all have different favourite parts of the story. So when we consider our life story, your life story, their life story, these are all entwined if you were in a relationship together. But your favourite parts of that story don't necessarily have to be the same, and somewhat linking on to the triggers. What you might see as something very important to your relationship, your ex might have seen something completely different. And it's very interesting, especially when I speak to people in my audio coaching course, which incidentally, if you want me to dive deep inside your unique situation, you might want to consider audio coaching. Check my website for more details. But when I speak to people on audio coaching, I get a broader picture of the different dynamics of connections. And over the many years that I've done these calls, what I have learned is that people have different favourite parts of the story. You know, you might feel that something was a little irrelevant almost in your situation, but then if and when your ex contacts you, it could be because of something very, very relatable to them, but not so much to you. So an example could be, I might be speaking to somebody doing audio coaching who is a dumpee, and then their dumper contacts them. And when we discuss this about what has happened, the dumpee may tell me that the dumper has said, you know, I was doing this, this and this, and it reminded me of you. And the dumpee is really shocked because to them, there is no real connection. To them, it's not really that relevant. But to the dumper, it could be very relevant. So what I've come to learn is that we all have different favourite parts of a story, different favourite parts of our life story. What you think is very relevant might not necessarily be as relevant to your ex. However, things that you don't seem to think as important, your ex, the dumper, may feel that this is incredibly important. Something that you can't even imagine right now could be the thing that makes your ex, the dumper, reach out to you. Now, if you're listening to this as a dumper and you're wondering, does my ex-dumpee still think of me? What I would say to you is as time goes on, they will still think about you, but it will likely start to lessen. If you're a dumper, you really need to be reaching out. You need to be making contact. Whereas if you're a dumpee, I strongly suggest you never contact your ex again unless your ex contacts you first, except for a few little different dynamics that I discuss during my audio coaching. There are some caveats to the rule. But generally speaking, dumpers should reach out and dumpees should not do so. I'm a strong believer that when we consider our life stories, when we consider the things which mean something to us, and it might not necessarily mean the same to somebody else, but vice versa, as I just described, I'm a strong believer that the life story is something which is ongoing. Okay, we never know when the story ends. We never know if and when you will hear from your ex again. We never know if and when a friend, a platonic friend that you used to spend time with might pop up in your life again. That's the beauty of life. We genuinely never know when this chapter ends what is going to happen in the next chapter. You've got to keep living your life to the full and make sure that if you don't hear from your ex during a certain period of time, you're not letting that affect you in a way which holds you back. You've got to keep moving forward. You've got to live your life to the absolute fullest. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.